Hi, this video is looking at the paper 2 non-fiction reading exam. I'm going to go through all 6 questions. So this exam's, remember, it's 2 hours. Section B is 1 hour. Section A is 1 hour. So 1 hour for the reading, 1 hour for the writing. Half an hour extra if you have 25% extra time. You get 6 questions on 2 extracts on the similar theme. This one is about prisons. So you get a 21st century text on prisons, or whatever the theme is, and then a 19th century one. The one we're looking at the start of the video is a place in El Salvador, where Donald Trump is recently putting, is thinking about sending some of the worst criminals from America. Okay, so you get 6 questions. 1s, 3 and 5 are retrieval questions. I'll talk about 6 later on. And then 2 are 4. 2 is the writer's craft, and then 4 is the evaluation question. They're roughly the times I would suggest and the marks available. You need roughly about 20 out of 40 to get a grade 4. And actually you can get nearly that by just doing the retrieval questions 1, 2, 5 and 6. Like I say, I will come on to question 6. But yeah, so you can get almost the grade 4 just by doing the retrieval questions. So you might think about doing the exam in this order, although the exam board does suggest doing it in the order of the exam. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think if you're just looking for a grade 4, grade 5, this would be a very good order to do it in, because the yellow ones there's no explanations needed, and then the blue ones were a little bit tougher. So if we were going to not do so well on one of the questions, it makes sense to leave the most difficult question to the end. However, if you're looking for maybe the higher grades, remember, you can almost just split the exam into 3 parts. So extract 1, question 1 and 2, 20 minutes. Extract 2, 3 and 4, 20 minutes. And then 5 and 6, where you're looking at both extracts, 20 minutes. Add on 5 minutes extra if you've got extra time. So good exam technique for the reading exam. Leave a 1-line quote gap between each quote. Start a new page for each question. And remember, put quotation marks around each quote. So this is what I mean by doing a page for each question. So if you finish and you've got 10 minutes left, you can go back and do more questions and do more quotes. It means you haven't got to like do arrows and make it confusing for the examiner. And remember, there's no such thing as finishing your English exam. If you've got a bit of time for your reading, just go back and add more quotes, and for your writing, proofread your spag. Okay, question 1 and 3 then, they are basically the same question, just on different extracts. So examiner feedback from EDUQAS say what students don't do is read the whole article. They just skim and look for the answer, which isn't a good thing to do. And for the last exam in November, a lot of students got one of the questions wrong because the final part of the question was in the final sentence of the final paragraph, and a lot of students missed it because they were skimming for an answer. And also make sure you read the question properly. And like I say, main mistake for question 1 and 3 is not reading the complete article before looking at the questions. And also, a very small number of students use the wrong text for the given question. So, dreadful mistake straight away where they're almost looking at the wrong extract. So like I say, you read the whole article first before you look for the answer. And you got questions like these. Yeah. So all you got to do is find the details in the text and short and simple answers. So what is the name of the director of the prison? Belemo Garcia. How many hours away is the prison from the country's capital? 2 hours. What's the capacity of the prison? 40,000. And this is one that I did with my students, just a smaller extract. Again, though, same skill. What item of Carl's clothing set off the bleeper? A belt. What is the name of Carl's hotel? The Windsor. What type of transport did the men use to get into Cairo? They travel by coach. Okay, question 2. This is the writer's craft question. How does the writer show that prisoners live in extremely tough and punishing conditions? And you've got to refer to the text to support any answer you do. So how to approach question 2 and get a good score. And remember, it will be on the 21st extract, so it's the same extract as question 1. Underline exactly what you're being asked to analyse in the question. So in this case, the prison is tough. Track your answer through the extract, beginning, middle and end. Make small quotes on a minimum of 6 to 10 quotes. Make sure the quotations link clearly to the theme of the question, the prison is tough, and be a human dictionary. Zoom in on quotes and explain their effect. And why do we want a lot of quotes? Well, it's almost a quote a mark. So it doesn't how good your answer is. If you only do one or quotes, you're only going to get 1 or 2 out of 10. So tips for this question and for question 4. If the quote is obvious or self-explanatory, there's no need to explain. 6 to 10 quotes from the whole text, i.e. beginning, middle and end. Don't just use a fragment of the quote, write enough to give context to your point. 1 sentence is fine. And if a writer uses a statistic, they do it for a reason. These are quite good to do answers on. So how to approach question 2 and get a good score? The exam board say the basic need for each idea is point and evidence. If the point is quite straightforward, no further analysis is needed. In other words, don't enforce. If you're doing a PEE or PEA, you don't need to do the final P. So you don't need to do the explanation or analysis if the quote is straightforward. However, more perceptive points will usually need more explanation and development. So in other words, if the quote is obvious, don't explain it. If it's one where you need to explain, then do explain. Another tip for this question is the one I just said. If the quote is obvious, you don't need to explain. So let's say if the quote was, the prison was worse than death, you can literally just shove it in a sentence. The writer shows the prisoners live in tough conditions when it says the prisoner is worse than death. What you wouldn't need to do is put the same thing and then do a little analysis where you show this shows it's a really horrible place. It's an absolute waste of time. So just get your mark and go on to your next quote. So again, for these ones, you could put, the writer shows it's extremely tough to live as the prison cells were described as incredibly hot. It shows the prisoners tough when it says the men were physically abused. So really simple quotes, don't bother explaining it, just take your marks and move on. So main mistakes from question 2 and 4 is not taking quotes from across the whole text. Extract, so you would get marked down for doing something like this. You've got to make sure you take quotes from all over the extract, and again you're going to zoom in on keywords and say why the writer has used them. So if it was the same question, how does the David Jones article show the prisoners lived in tough conditions, and the quote was the only water they had was filthy, you could zoom in on filthy. What does it mean? Disgustingly dirty. So my answer would be, the writer shows the prisoners live in extremely tough and punishing conditions by saying the only water they had was filthy. This tells the reader the men had to live off disgustingly dirty water. So remember, when you're explaining your answer, 3 parts of it: the focus of the question, the quote, and then the effect on the reader. Yeah, you wouldn't get a mark. Remember as well, being a human dictionary is important because you've got to zoom into the specific word and say the effect on it. And what a lot of students is, they put something general like this one. This makes it sound dramatic to the reader. Or another thing students do is just repeat the question. This suggests it's very tough for the prisoners, even though I've already had my sentence starter that it's tough. So they're not going to get you marks. Zoom into the specific word. Okay, so try to highlight 10 quotes from across the text and make some more comments on them. And I'll just go through the ones I did. The writer shows it's very tough and punishing. As he says, death would be infinitely more welcome than being here. It's very tough as they're in cells for 23.5 hours a day. It's very tough as the men are obliged to squat on mattressless metal bunks. So then I've zoomed on the word squat. This means they're all spending all day on their knees and can't stand up straight. This would be very uncomfortable. It's very punishing as they're permitted to speak only in whispers. The writer shows it's punishing with sinister looking guards. This suggests they look evil and threatening. It's punishing if they look at the guards in the eye, they receive a sharp baton jab to the ribs. It's punishing when it says zoo animals are treated better than this. This tells the reader the men aren't even treated as human beings. It's tough when it says these men will never smell fresh air or see daylight again. This tells the reader the men will die in prison. Finally, it's tough the men use a communal lavatory. This means they have no privacy even when they're going to the toilet. So I've got 9 answers there. 4 of them are easy ones I haven't explained, so that's probably the ratio you're going for. Notice how I keep, even though it sounds really boring and robotic, I keep linking back to the question by saying it's tough and punishing, and then I explain if I need to. Okay, question 4 is the same as question 2 really, but it's just on the other extract. You might have to agree. And there's 2 types of wording you'll get for question 4. It will either be what do you think and feel about something, or the one we're going to look at in the extract, the ocean at Nazaré seems very powerful. How far do you agree? The example will pick something where you should agree. Okay, so like I said, similar to question 2, but it's on the 19th century extract now. So same as that one, but it's on the 4. Comment on the quotes methodically throughout the whole text, so beginning, middle and end. If you need to start with your opinion, Show that you mostly agree, e.g. I agree the ocean is powerful. Be a human dictionary, zoom in on keywords, and make small comments on 6 to 10 quotes. Again, simple ones don't explain, complicated ones explain. Okay, and the examples say best responses cover the whole text, which we've covered. Okay, so make sure you do that. So this question is about Nazaré. So this is a place, a beach or a town in Portugal where they get the biggest waves in the world. Some of them are nearly 100 foot. And the question, like I said, is the ocean at Nazaré seems very powerful. How far do you agree? Again, you would read the whole extract. And if the quote is obvious, there's no need to explain, which I've said before. So if the quote was there are 90-foot waves regularly, you can literally put, I agree the ocean seems powerful as it says there are 90-foot waves regularly. And again, if there's a statistic, they do it for a reason, yeah? So they're not, if you look at the bottom one, they're not going to use a statistic if it was like the ocean regularly creates waves up to 2 foot high. They're not going to put that because it's not particularly exciting or interesting. But the fact they put waves up to 100 foot high, what are they trying to tell you? Well, they're trying to tell you the waves are absolutely gigantic, yeah? So again, though, that would be an easy one for you to put in. Okay, ones where you have to explain it would be, it completely shattered my surfboard. It could have said it completely broke, or it completely injured, or it completely damaged my surfboard. Why has the writer chosen that word in particular, shattered? Why have they used that verb over thousands of others? Well, come on, PowerPoint. Yeah, so what does shattered means? It means broken into very small pieces. So then my answer would be, the writer shows the power of the ocean with the quote, it completely shattered my surfboard. This suggests the waves broke his board into very small pieces. Again, focus of the question, quote, effect on the reader. Okay, so I'll go through my ones again for this one. Pause the video if you want to read the extract yourselves again. So remember, we're looking for 10 quotes, but I've just made this a small extract just for this video. I agree the ocean is powerful as Nazaré is considered one of the most monstrous and lethal surf spots in the world. Then I've zoomed into monstrous and lethal and said this means it's huge, intimidating and can kill. I agree it seems very powerful as it's described the riskiest spot in the world to surf. It's very powerful as the ocean regularly creates waves up to 100 foot high. The writer shows the power of the ocean with the quote, the mammoth wave. So I'm zooming into mammoth. This tells the reader Nazaré has immensely large, huge, enormous waves. Finally, I agree the ocean is powerful. As Andrew says, the waves destroyed his back. This suggests his back was violently broken by the waves at Nazaré. So again, I've got 5 answers. I've got 2 easy ones. Okay, question 5. Now we're looking at both extracts. So, in this case here, it's about 2 prisons, 200 years apart. And the question is, to answer the following questions, you must use both texts. So questions meaning questions 5 and question 6. Using information from both texts, explain briefly what you find out about the appearance of the prison guards. So question 5, this is a retrieval question like question 1 and 3, but it's for both texts. Students will gain full marks by selecting 2 details from each text, and then the exam board say in quotes, it should be roughly 4 sentences. You shouldn't compare text, and you should not explain your quotes. Come on. Yeah, so you've got to make sure you're clear about which text you're talking about, though. So you could even call them extract A or extract B or source 1 and source 2, or you could do the writers' names or any way you want to. So I've put El Salvador because that's that Salvador prison, and the other prison is about Oscar Wilde. So as long as you make it clear which text you're talking about, that's absolutely fine, and you should put them in different subheadings in different paragraphs. So again, a lot of students don't keep focused on the question. Remember, the focus of the question is just the appearance of the prison guards. And again, what a lot of students do wrong is they start to compare on this question. It's only 4 marks. It's only retrieval. It doesn't say compare. It says explain briefly. So you do not compare on this question. You will waste time. Okay, this one is about Ben Fogle and Captain Scott, 2 explorers who went to the South Pole. And again, I'm just showing this was an example. This one was explain briefly what we learn about the food. So all you would do is you put them in different paragraphs with a little sentence starter. Don't just put quotes down. So don't just put salami, chocolate, cheese. Do a little sentence starter and you'll get 4 marks for that. All this question is testing is your ability to retrieve the information they want. So in this case, it's what food the men had on their expeditions. So like I say, do not compare. and don't drift away from the focus of the question. So in this case, it's what the appearance of the guards are. So you could do anything. You could say if they held a gun, you could say they look happy, they look angry, they wore a bulletproof vest, anything to do with their appearance. Okay, here's the text if you want to pause it. I'm just going to go through it though. So again, you're not going to find loads and loads and loads. Remember, I've made the extract small. You've got to have a bigger extract. But you're only going to find a few things because it's only 4 marks. Okay, so again, do your subheadings. In the El Salvador prison, the guards are described as sinister looking. The writer says the guards wore visored black helmets and carry a baton. Oscar Wilde says the guards were smartly dressed. He says the guards he saw both had batons. So I put 5 quotes in there. I didn't need to. I could have just put 4, but I just thought, well, if I mess one up, I've got one in reserve. Okay, question 6 is a little bit tricky, and you can sort of tackle it in a couple of ways, really. So this is an example. Both of these texts are about expeditions to the South Pole. Compare the difficulties Scott and Fogel endured on their expedition. So there's Fogel and his team, and there's Captain Scott and his team. So you can do this in 2 ways. So I would say if you're looking for question 4 and 5, if you're looking for grade 4 and 5, treat it as a search and find question. Treat it as the same as question 5, but 4 or 5 quotes needed from each extract. Keep focused on the theme of the question, which is difficult. You shouldn't compare texts, and you shouldn't explain your quotes. Remember, this is just for students going for grade 4 and grade 5. If you are looking for the higher grades, you will need to compare and you will need to explain your quotes. So what the exam board say about this question, and I get that it's confusing because it does say compare on the question. This is literally a quote from the exam board. They say it's not really a comparison question, and they advise you to keep focused on the theme of the question, the difficulties the men faced. Remember, you can reuse quotes in question 2 and question 4 now. If in the question it mentions impressions, then answer it the same as paper 1 reading. So what opinions you have. So the exam board say it's a mistake for students to think of this as the comparison question. Many of the available marks here are for the retrieval of correct details from the texts. My advice would be to most students would be get your quotes first, then compare and explain your answers if you have time. So if it was me, I would do something like this. Remember, you need to make them clear again. I would just use their names. So if it was me, I would do this. So I would separate it, and then I would just do my quote. So what are the difficulties the men faced? He says he thought he was going to die. He suffered from hypothermia. Fogel thought I could die here. They fell into a huge crack in the ice. It was also hard as they went across 481 miles of snow in 18 days. While Scott said it was hard as the men felt miserable. The weather was very cold. The temperature was just above freezing. It was also hard as they had drip pools on the floor of the tents. It was hard as because of the storm, it was utterly impossible to move. So if you're just looking for grade 4 and 5, I would do this. This can get you 7 or 8 marks. So it's not going to get you like 4 marks. This can get you 7 or 8 marks out of 10, which is a great score. If you're looking for the higher grades, then compare. So for example, both men suffered huge difficulties with the weather. Fogel suffered with frostbite and had a bit of hypothermia. And look, I'm using that word likewise. Likewise, Scott found the weather difficult, even worse than Fogel. He says the temperature now is just above freezing. The storm shows no signs of dying down, and it was utterly impossible to move due to the weather. So another one, this time I'm doing a contrast. The difficulties had contrasting effects on the men's ability to travel on their expeditions. Despite the difficulties, Fogel managed to travel 481 miles of snow in 18 days. However, so I'm showing a contrast. However, Scott found it utterly impossible to move due to the problems he faced. And in a perfect world, you could do a mixture. So like I say, grades 4 and 5, I would say get your quotes in first. Then if you're looking for higher grades, or if you've got a bit of extra time, do the ones where you compare and maybe explain.